Happy birthday to Stephen Shepard, Ken Friedman, Tsippi Golenberg, Ken Kirschenbaum, Elaine Markowitz, Greg Nathanson, Dennis Bacall, Ian Reinstein, Asher Epstein, Daniel Hirsch, Alan Revenstock, and Ryan Reinstein. Happy birthday, everybody. Most definitely. I want to say thank you to everybody who helped to make today's services beautiful and possible, leading off with Mark Sussman, who was led us Birchot HaShachar, Psukei Zimra, Kantor B, who led us in Shachri and will lead us in the Torah service, Musaf, and our Torah readers, Stephen Rabinowitz, Rabbi Pachter, Mark Sussman, our Haftorah reader, Tony Corman, our floor captain was Kevin Whalen, our Torah Gavai was Mark Sussman and Rabbi Pachter, our digital Gavais, Mark Bettman and Hannah Carroll. Thank you, everybody, very, very much. So why do we pray? This is not a question of why you do or don't go to synagogue. It's a question of why, if you do, recite words either from the prayer book or from your heart. Why do we pray? Some people do it 3 times a day. Some people do it once a week, once a day, once a year. Why do we pray? You do it to give thanks. Why do we pray?
To show God that He should help us.
To ask God to help us.
Well,
Show Him that we're worthy of His help.
That's right, we're
Showing Him. Comfort. We find comfort in prayer. Why else? To remind us that there is a power stronger and greater than we are. To nourish our souls. Now, it's amazing to me, and not really amazing, that nobody in here said, because we're commanded to. No! No! You didn't say it, don't say it, don't, just because I said it up here. Nobody said, what? Partial credit. He gets partial credit. Okay. Nobody said because we're commanded to, because you know what? Let's be honest. Jews today, in the year 2023, in a conservative synagogue, it's not 100% really the front of our mind. And I get it. There's not one answer, and there can't be one answer, because prayer, to another degree, is about relationships between us and God, between us and ourselves, between us and the community, between us and our ancestors. It's about relationships. Each one of us has our own set of relationships, so each one of us is going to find their own purpose, meaning behind prayer. But is there something larger that prayer can do? How could we embrace prayer? How could we embrace it so that it's there for us when we need it, when we crave comfort and hope? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught, and I quote, "Prayer is meaningless unless it is subversive, unless it seeks to overthrow and ruin the pyramids of callousness, hatred, opportunism, falsehoods. The liturgical movement must become a revolutionary movement, seeking to overthrow the forces that continue to destroy the promise, the hope, the vision." If prayer doesn't turn things upside down at times, not all the time, but if prayer doesn't make us feel uncomfortable because it causes us to face things that are real, then Rabbi Heschel says that it's meaningless. That doesn't mean every time we pray it has to, but it has to be a part of the equation. I want to bring you two sources today to show you the power of prayer, because I, including myself, believe that we don't really embrace it. Two sources that will remind us how prayer can transform our lives if we're willing to believe and embrace it. When God told Moses to speak to Pharaoh, what did he say? God didn't tell Moses to say to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," initially. What did he say? "Shalach et ami ya'avduni bamidbar." And then he says, "Shalach et ami v'yahagu li bamidbar." God says, send my people out so that they can pray in the wilderness. Send my people out so they can celebrate in the wilderness. Wait a second, God. If you want the Jewish people to go free, why not just ask Pharaoh, let my people go? If God knew that that was the end goal, why not just do it? Because when Moses went to the Israelites and said, "Guys, I got this God, and God is going to free you, bring you to a new promised land. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened in your lives." Moses goes back to God and reports and says, "God, lo shamu el Moshe mikotzer ruach uma'avodah kasha." When Moses told this to the Israelites, they would not listen to Moses because they were oppressed by cruel bondage. Why did God want the Israelites to go to the wilderness to pray? Because they existed in the mentality of slaves. They couldn't hear. They couldn't believe. And God knew that going into the wilderness to pray would lead them through transformation. It would lead them to be able to see hope, to see a better life, to see freedom. Prayer allowed the Israelites to change their mindset. Do you think that those slaves would have taken the blood of the lamb, which was the god of the Egyptians, and painted it on their doorposts after 200 years of oppression? No way! Prayer brought them to the place where they could do that. But this is not something that just exists in the Bible. This is real as it gets. In fact, I don't know if we appreciate it. Last week, in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, my family and I sat down to watch the movie of the story of Ruby Bridges, the first girl to walk into an integrated school. We've seen the pictures. We've seen the pictures with her surrounded by 4 federal marshals day after day after day. And in this movie, what happens day after day after day? She walks in and there's people screaming at her on the path up to the school. Screaming things I won't say from up here, and I hope none of us would ever say. Screaming the most disgusting, despicable things. And here's the thing, we would expect that a 7-year-old girl would be horrified, terrified, suffering from mental breakdowns, PTSD and worse, and she doesn't. Many adults in that day and age expected it, and a man by the name of Dr. Robert Coles, a trained child psychiatrist specialized in helping children under stress, offered his help to Ruby and her family. He was amazed that Ruby was barely affected. He was marveled at her emotional strength. And so in the movie, I watched. One day, Ruby's teacher noticed that Ruby stopped on the stairs and turned around and mumbled some words and turned around and went back in. Ruby's teacher reported this to the child psychiatrist, Dr. Coles. Dr. Coles said, "Ruby, I told you not to talk to them. Don't engage with them." Ruby said, "I wasn't talking to them. I was saying a prayer for them." Usually Ruby prayed in the car on the way to school, but that day she forgot to say her prayers. Her mother taught her that every time she was afraid, she should pray to God. With childlike obedience, when Ruby felt afraid that morning, she stopped right there and said a prayer. Dr. Coles was amazed and asked, "What do you pray for?" She said, "I pray because they need praying." "Ruby, why do you think they need you to pray for them?" "Because I should." Dr. Coles asked Ruby what she prayed. Ruby answered, "I pray for me that I would be strong and not afraid, and I pray for my enemies that God would forgive them." Now I said to myself, it's a beautiful way that Disney made a movie. That scene could not have been real. It must have been falsified, boosted up to increase sales of the movie to the Christian community, because Disney, after all, is a business. So I went and did a lot of research. It took me a while. But I found an interview with Ruby Bridges as an adult. And she said, quote, "That was how I started praying on the way to school. The things people yelled at me didn't seem to touch me. Prayer was my protection. After walking up the steps past the angry crowd, though, I was glad to see my teacher, Miss Henry. She gave me a hug every day and sat beside me in that stead of that big teacher's desk. She was my friend." Friends, I've smirked a time or two when I've pulled up behind a car at a traffic light and I've seen that bumper sticker that says, "Prayer can save you." I've kind of been like, yeah, right. And I have also had plenty of times where I've taken the prayer book and I've read every word in it and had no idea what I read because I just was reading words. The syllables came off my tongue, and that's as far as it went. But perhaps the message of the Israelites going out to pray and celebrate with God, and perhaps the message of Ruby Bridges, is that we need to take our prayer a little more seriously. Perhaps we need to understand that prayer is the power that can free us from whatever enslaves each of us. As Rabbi Heschel said, the primary purpose of prayer is not to make requests. The primary purpose of prayer is to praise, is to sing, is to chant, because the essence of prayer is a song, and man cannot live without song. He concludes and he says, prayer may not save us, but prayer may make us worthy of being saved. So as we head off to pray Musaf, let us come together in song, lifting up one another so that each of us and all of us will be worthy of being saved when the time comes. Shabbat Shalom.